Late Friday evening, a federal court in Texas issued a ruling that threatens the health care coverage for more than 1.3 million Kentuckians and would cost every Kentucky family significantly more just to see a doctor. The ruling would eliminate the ACA in Kentucky, meaning a potential loss of coverage for the nearly 50% of Kentuckians who have a pre-existing condition. It would immediately end coverage for more than 500,000 Kentuckians covered by expanded Medicaid, and it would eliminate nearly $50 billion that is set to cycle through our economy over the next 10 years. It would eliminate seniors' prescription drug discounts, costing 12 million seniors across the United States at least $2,300 more. It would kick young Kentuckians off their parents' insurance, creating another huge cost for our young people that are attending college or starting their first job. It would allow companies to charge women up to 50% more than men, and even allow what's called a senior tax, charging Kentuckians who are 55 to 64 years old much more. The ruling would devastate Kentucky. It would devastate our families, and I will not let it stand. As your Attorney General, I will fight this ruling through every motion and every appeal that is necessary until we win for our families. Now, regardless of what you call the Affordable Care Act, this is not a battle of right versus left, but a battle of life versus death. It's a battle of life versus death for this state and virtually all of our people. So it's important that we educate Kentuckians on just how devastating this ruling could be. That's why we've put out 10 major harms, and these are only some of the harms this ruling would cause, and we're going to add some numbers to them today. Harm number 1, no more mandatory coverage for pre-existing conditions. 133 million Americans, including 17 million children, have a pre-existing condition. It's estimated that half of Kentuckians under the age of 65 have a pre-existing condition. That's nearly 1.89 million Kentuckians in total with pre-existing conditions. Insurance companies would therefore be able to deny coverage to nearly half our population and cancel that coverage when people get sick. When you think about pre-existing conditions, you probably think about conditions that Kentucky typically leads or is close to the lead on in the country. Conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and lung cancer. But here are some other pre-existing conditions: arthritis, acne, and asthma, high cholesterol, heartburn, and ulcers, alcohol abuse or drug abuse with recent treatment. If you are a Kentuckian with any of these or countless other pre-existing conditions, you could be denied coverage. I'd know. 3 members of my immediate family qualify as having a pre-existing condition. And nationwide, here are just a few numbers. 44 million Americans suffer from high blood pressure. 44 million Americans suffer from high cholesterol. 34 million Americans suffer from asthma. Harm number 2, the ruling would wipe out Medicaid expansion entirely, which has provided coverage primarily for the first time for over 500,000 Kentuckians and 17 million Americans. It'll cost Kentucky more than $50 billion over 10 years. Harm number 3, children under the age of 26 would not be able to remain on their parents' insurance. This is one of the most popular provisions of the Affordable Care Act that has allowed so many of our young people that face so many challenges, such as crushing student debt, to get through college, possibly to get through a graduate school, or to start their first job and get off to a good start. Harm number 4, seniors would have to pay more for prescription drugs. The ACA closes what's called the donut hole, or coverage gap in Medicare Part D prescription drug coverage over time. If the decision is not reversed, 12 million American seniors would face an increase of $2,300 more per year at a time in Kentucky where our seniors are raising, more seniors are raising their grandchildren or relatives than ever before. Each and every one of those dollars is sacred. Harm number 5, women would once again be charged more for their health care coverage than men. The ACA eliminated discrimination in health care. Before the ACA, some insurance companies charged women up to 50% more than men. Harm number 6, guaranteed pregnancy coverage would be eliminated. Women will see huge costs and in many cases, no prenatal care. In what is the wealthiest country in the world, we still have an unacceptable infant mortality rate. By removing coverage, by allowing excessive charges, by eliminating prenatal coverage for so many, we will only see that problem increase. Harm number 7, substance use disorder treatment would no longer be a required benefit. The single greatest challenge threatening Kentucky's families right now is our drug epidemic. We see more and more of our people fall into addiction every day. This ruling would eliminate a significant amount of funding, which is already too little, but would eliminate a significant amount of funding that is currently being used to get people better and ultimately to get them back with their families. The Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky reported a 740% increase in substance abuse services for Medicaid expansion beneficiaries. All of that would be gone. And they reported a 400% increase in the number of Kentuckians with traditional Medicaid receiving substance abuse treatment from 2014 to 2016. This state, facing the worst drug epidemic of our lifetime, would have less funding to get its people better. Harm number 8, rural hospitals would suffer. I'd encourage those in this room to talk to rural providers. How expanded Medicaid and other parts of the Affordable Care Act are absolutely critical to keeping the doors open. At a time when those rural health care providers are facing more challenges than ever before, I believe many of those providers will tell you that they will have to close the doors on even fairly large operations. Harm number 9, children would lose access to no-cost immunizations and well child visits. Just to give an example, at a time where we have seen such a spike in hepatitis A, free immunizations for our children will be eliminated as necessary coverage under this ruling. Harm number 10, older Kentuckians would be charged vastly more than younger ones. The ACA guarantees that older Kentuckians can never be charged more than 3 times as much as younger ones for health care coverage. Those protections would be eliminated, and we would see a very large increase, especially for those Kentuckians aged 55 to 64. It is because of these harms that every major health organization in the United States opposes this challenge to the ACA, and I believe opposes this ruling. Just a few of those organizations: the American Medical Association, the American Hospital Association, the American College of Physicians, the American Cancer Society, the American Diabetes Association, the American Heart Association, the American Lung Association, the Association of American Medical Colleges, AARP, the National Health Law Program, Small Business Majority Foundation, American Public Health Scholars, and the American Public Health Association. Based on these harms, we must challenge, we must fight Friday night's ruling. Lives hang in the balance. The very first thing we have to do is to make sure this ruling is stayed or frozen and cannot go into effect, that people cannot lose their coverage, that seniors cannot be charged more, that women cannot be discriminated against until we receive a full and final ruling, until we are able to get through all of the appeals. Now, I've seen articles that says that the federal government believes that the law remains in effect, but we simply can't trust when so much is on the line. The ruling itself is at least unclear about whether the decision is stayed. The second step we need to take is to get this decision to an appellate court as soon as possible. This will take some work too, because the decision itself does not contain some of the language suggesting that it's final and appealable, the type of language that an appellate court looks for when deciding if they can immediately take the case. So this week, I, along with a coalition of 16 attorneys general, will be taking these steps in the initial challenges of Friday night's ruling. You I believe we'll see our first filing as early as this afternoon. This year, I've had the honor of standing up for and fighting for over 200,000 Kentucky families who were facing illegal cuts in their retirements. Last week, we delivered a landmark win for those families. Now, we must fight this attack, an attack that threatens the health care coverage of over 1.3 million Kentuckians, that threatens the future of rural health care. We have to fight to continue to prevent discrimination inside our health care system against women and seniors, and to give our young people a real chance at the start of their careers. This is one of the most important fights that we've ever been in here in Kentucky, but I'm ready for that fight. We will challenge this law. With this ruling, we will get it overturned. We will ensure that Kentuckians who need to see a doctor ultimately can see that doctor. I'm happy to take any questions.
General, I know there's like you said, what, 16 attorneys general?
Yes.
Part of this case. Will your office be taking the lead on this?
Oh,
Be the main?
since the very beginning, we have been working directly with California. When you've got 16 generals on there, I think it's fair to say that there is more than one leader. But we have been as active as any other state. We will continue to be that active. That includes setting the strategy. That includes working on the briefs. And that'll include the arguments themselves if necessary.
But you said in your tweet that you would take the lead. That
Right.
implies you are going to be the lead actor as opposed to Beshear from California, who's
Javier.
first among equals.
Oh.
Is that not changing?
No, Javier Beshear is a great attorney general, and we have a wonderful working relationship with him. But what you are going to see is Kentucky as vocal, if not more vocal, than any other state that's in it, with an active role. But we are still going to work with all those other states. We are stronger together, along with all of those associations that we listed.
Would this coalition of attorneys
Mhm.
let you take the lead because you're on the ballot in 2019?
This, at the end of the day, this isn't about any election. This is about future health care coverage for 1.3 million Kentuckians. That is bigger than any election.
What you're going to have people, because you are running for governor, say this is about that.
This is my job. We have never faced as imminent of a threat on the future health of our people as we face right now. I've been in this since before I announced. We've been in this since 2017 in different ways. Lawrence, this is me doing my job, and now more than ever, it's important that I do it.
Will you argue any of these upcoming motions yourself? You did that some in the
Right.
case.
Well, this is in Texas, and so the immediate motions, we'll probably have someone who has been there, but I'm certainly going to offer all of our services, including that to our coalition. And again, we are adamant that we must act with urgency and that we have to push as hard and as fast as we can to overturn this ruling. This ruling threatens health care coverage for all Americans, but its devastating impacts on Kentucky, given the health of our people, I believe is more stark than just about any other state in the country.
You talked about the effects of losing the ACA. Without getting too deep into the weeds, what are the legal arguments for keeping it? The ruling essentially says it's
Right.
this supports a government overreach.
Well, I believe that this ruling is flawed in many different ways. It actually eliminates more parts of the ACA than even the people who sued were arguing for. That it goes far and beyond anything that any of the parties have ever argued. The parties argued that parts of the ACA weren't severable. In other words, if you threw out the mandate, that parts of it must be thrown out. But they didn't argue that certain other pieces would. This ruling is significantly broader than anyone expected, and I believe that most legal scholars would tell you that they believe that we'll be able to get it overturned.
What is the legal theory that supports that?
Well, it's the same legal theories that we laid out in the briefs in front of the judge. We just believe the judge got it wrong. And ultimately, those same arguments will be the ones that are in front of the Fifth Circuit when we reach it. And we can get you a copy of those
One
briefs.
particular legal theory that a lot of legal scholars are citing yesterday and today. What's your opinion of the number one legal theory that makes this ruling fall?
Oh, I believe that the judge has significantly overstepped. I believe that the ruling is constitutional and that the removal of the mandate in no way invalidates the other provisions.
I'm not hearing a legal theory there.
Okay, Al, I'm giving you.
Severability.
I just talked about severability. I think I just mentioned that there was the argument of severability by one side as to certain portions, but not as to other portions. In other words, that ruling on severability was even beyond what was initially argued.
Wasn't the ACA on its way out anyway because the individual mandate was taken away by Congress?
I don't believe so. In fact, enrollment was for the federal exchange was going to close on Saturday, and this ruling came out late on Friday. You still see significant numbers of Americans in the millions on that. Medicaid expansion, which covers, I believe, 17 million Americans, was still certainly fully intact, including for 500,000 Kentuckians. So, no, I believe that the Affordable Care Act was still alive, was still providing really important pieces, such as coverage for kids under 26, preventing discrimination inside of health care, and so many other ways.
How does it complicate things when you have the governor who's on the opposite side of this?
I don't think he's a part of this lawsuit,
No, I'm
at least.
talking about as far as his attitude toward
Oh.
Medicaid expansion and wanting to make changes with the expansion and things like that.
I don't consider Governor Bevin when looking at what our job is in protecting the health care coverage for Kentucky families. And like I said, he hasn't been a part of this lawsuit. So
What's your opinion of what he wants to do with Medicaid?
I'm against his waiver.
How much resources,
But to have a waiver would require having expanded Medicaid.
how many resources have you devoted to this so far? Number of attorneys or money?
We have had some of our top attorneys, including the leader of our civil group, involved in the day-to-day, and we're only going to increase those number of resources as we move forward.
Senator McConnell has made this big push to get conservative justices throughout the court system. Do you think that makes it a little bit more difficult to get this thing overturned, especially since the recent swing at the Supreme Court?
I believe that this decision ultimately will be overturned by the Fifth Circuit because I believe that there are a number of problems in it. And at the end of the day, whether judges tend to be more liberal or more conservative in certain views, their job is to uphold the law. And if you have a lower court ruling that is in error, that we would hope and we would expect that they would overturn it regardless of their philosophical bent.
I think you said in your release that you hope ultimately it would go to the Supreme Court.
Hmm.
So if you do get a favorable ruling at the Circuit Court, would you still want the Supreme Court to pick it up?
At the end of the day, what I care about is that we are able to keep these important protections to our families intact. So whichever level that we can get that ruling at, I'll be satisfied.
Your father said back when his embrace of the Affordable Care Act was being debated that it might be unpopular at the time, but that ultimately it would be a political plus. And we see Democrats having success in other states, but not this state, on the issue of health care in the last election. What do you think the people of Kentucky are on this issue at this point in terms of
Right.
the status of Obamacare, as most people call it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that the 1.3 million Kentuckians that could potentially lose coverage based on this ruling ought to be highly concerned. That regardless of what you call it, for so many of our families, it's the difference between life and death. If you are able to cancel people's coverage when they become sick or very sick, which this ruling would allow, that's the difference between life and death for those individuals. I had a friend that passed away on the 13th that got 9 extra years because of a heart transplant. That individual had previously suffered from cancer before then. He would have never qualified for the coverage that would have allowed that to happen. He would have not been with us the last 9 years, and those are the types of challenges that people are going to face.
1.3 million is not a majority of the Kentucky population. Do you think that people are generally in favor of the continuation of the Affordable Care Act or not in this state?
I believe that people are in favor of health care covering pre-existing conditions and not being able to prevent them from getting coverage. I believe that Kentuckians don't believe that an insurance company should be able to kick you out of your coverage just because you become sick. I believe that Kentuckians ultimately support providing coverage for 500,000 Kentuckians for the first time ever, and are certainly for the $50 billion that cycle through our economy. I think Kentuckians believe that you shouldn't be able to charge women more than men for the same types of coverage. I believe that Kentuckians don't want our seniors to have to pay more, and ultimately believe that they are entitled to affordable health care coverage. So I believe that if Kentuckians understand what's at stake, that they will most certainly be with us on this, that they will be supportive of us overturning this ruling, and ultimately are supportive of those provisions inside the Affordable Care Act.
At the risk of divulging too much personal information, could you elaborate on your experience with pre-existing conditions? You said earlier you have some family members.
When you see the list of pre-existing conditions, everything from asthma to acne to others, it can impact every Kentucky family. And I imagine that any family that sees or reads this, when they look around their dinner table, probably half of them are going to be suffering from some pre-existing condition. Whether that's the parents suffering from heart disease, diabetes, high cholesterol, whether that's kids suffering from asthma or other issues. It impacts us all. And the concept, when you look across the table at your kids or at your wife, that they could be kicked out of their coverage when they are healthy people, and it's just wrong.
So you're talking about your immediate family when you made that?
I'm talking about my immediate family.
But you don't want to go any farther?
No.
All right.
You said this is about politics, but does this give Democrats an issue they can use?
At the end of the day, my hope is that Democrats and Republicans can come together on this. It's too dire for Kentucky. The implications, if this ruling isn't overturned, hurts everybody. When we talk about 1.3 million Kentuckians losing health care coverage, a whole lot of them are Republicans. When we talk about the 500,000 people that have health care coverage for the first time because of expanded Medicaid, a whole lot of them are Republicans. When we talk about rural health care, I believe being gutted, if we take the $50 billion out of the economy that's going to flow in through expanded Medicaid, I mean, a lot of those organizations are run by Democrats or Republicans. And I don't think that the American Medical Association is a liberal group. So from those within the industry or who are trying to do the right thing, this is not a battle of right versus left. I think it's a battle of life versus death or right versus wrong.
Well, we're just asking you to handicap the thing politically. I mean, it would seem to give Democrats in this state a stronger talking point on the issue that has been so helpful to Democrats in other states, but not necessarily here.
But again, I want to give Republicans the opportunity to be supportive of this. You know, if a Republican state legislator looks around his or her kitchen table and sees what I see, they may be supportive of our actions. If there's a Republican legislator or cabinet secretary that has been in the healthcare industry and understands the implications that'll happen, I want them to have the potential to be in support of it. At the end of the day, when it impacts this many Kentuckians, we should be Kentuckians first and Democrats or Republicans second or last. All right. Thank you all very much.